where faith matters. The Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And as I said, no stranger to radio. I think he's on the air as much as we are, probably more so. That's Governor David A. Paterson, 55th Governor of the state of New York. Good morning, Governor.
Well, good morning, and I hope you all have enjoyed the July 4th weekend.
Well, that depends on the conversation we have with you today, how enjoyable it's been.
I enjoyed mine, Reverend.
I always enjoy talking to you.
I enjoyed mine.
Yeah. So I'm watching the George Latimer victory celebration, and right next to George Latimer, Rev, is David A. Paterson. Mm-hmm. And I was very happy to see you there because, Governor, the fact that he was able to defeat someone who really, promulgated such hatred, anti-Semitism, and to see Latimer win it was a statement that ultimately hatred is going to do you in. You're not going to be a victorious candidate if your platform is predicated on hating others. In this case, it was a lot of anti-Semitism. What do you say?
You know, Rabbi, I wish I could just hang up the phone and just listen in for the rest of the show. You hit the nail right on the head. And the difference between this race and other races is that this wasn't a choice between moderate Democratic political policy and progressive political policy. There are plenty of people who are progressives who are in our Democratic Party who run races all the time. What made this race more interesting and really more revolting in some ways is that this was a choice between good and evil, and not enough people sided with good. And I think that's where we are in our society. This man, Mr. Bowman, is the one who continually makes coded statements that are designed to appeal to anti-Semites. He routinely picks on the Jewish not-for-profits and the organizations that raise money like AIPAC, always talks about them. Oddly enough, doesn't talk about any other white organizations that do the same thing. So he has targeted the Jewish community, and it was time to put a stop to this. And so when I heard that George Latimer, who's a longtime friend of mine and who helped me orchestrate the change of the Senate from Republican to Democrat in 2008, he is someone who cares about people. And even in his victory speech, he talked about how the people in Washington who have common sense have got to stop talking to each other and stop reacting to the people on the far left. And my final thought is, it's one thing that I was standing next to Latimer, but there weren't too many people bothering to even get involved in this race who should have and didn't. Particularly right now, as I've said on the show plenty of times, back in the tough times when Martin Luther King was marching in some of the most dangerous places in this country and eventually did lose his life in one of those places, there were of the whites who marched with him, 65% of the whites were Jewish. Now, the Jews didn't necessarily have any issue in this conflict between the way the Southerners ran their governments and black people who lived under that rule, but they felt that, as King always said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and that's why they all went down there. And what I wanted to do was demonstrate to people that I heard what Dr. King said, and that's why I was in the Bronx several times, and particularly on his victory night.
Governor, Rabbi, was upset. We were on the phone talking about some of the language that was used by the incumbent, and just reducing the platform to a street level and taking away the dignity that we're trying to restore to the political process and political position. Speak to that, Governor, because I'm frustrated. Of course, I'm a man of the cloth, so moral standards and all that. But just civility. I mean, just what holds our society together.
Well, Reverend, when I was 31, I was elected to the New York State Senate. And in my first few years, I was really thinking about trying to turn out the vote among young people. So I had a lot of rallies in which there were rap performers. I mean, people you now would know who were there. And I knew that the language was going to be a little tough and that kind of thing. But that's how young people act. I never had an event, nor did I ever see one, with the profanity, the garbage, I mean, just the horrible contact that they had at that rally. Even AOC, who I probably agree with on like 5% of what she believes in, but she's always conducted herself with a certain amount of class, and I've always respected that, and, always doesn't seem to allow to let herself get antagonized. She was right in the middle of it, along with Bowman.
And
Bowman,
Bernie Sanders.
And Bernie Sanders, poor Bernie, probably never even knew what hit him when he got there. But the thing is that Mr. Bowman happened to be the person who I called 3 times while he was congressman. And the reason was there was a young minority male who graduated high school who wanted to go to West Point. And when they asked me why I was calling, I knew that's why they weren't calling me back. And finally, when I demanded that they give me an answer, they said, well, he should be doing something better than going in the military. So now after this guy gets through high school, they are going to presume to tell him what to do with the rest of his life. And but you know what? Now they don't have to call me back at all.
Well, they will. He may need a job,
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, Governor and Rev. I remember in school coming home with a test score, and my mother would look at it and say, Joe, is this the best you could do? And the point was, obviously, you could do better. More effort, you could do better. And I look at what's happening in Washington, and I've come to the realization we no longer ask, is this the best you can do? What we're doing is saying, which is better? That best standard has been lowered. Moynihan would talk about the dumbing down of America. But we no longer seek the best, we seek the better. Is that an accurate depiction, Governor?
I think so, and which is the least of the 2 harms that could be caused if the other guy, in this case, the 2 men running, the guy wins. And unfortunately, we're really seeing this. I mean, after that debacle involving President Biden last week, his White House has answered the same question 3 different ways. Did he see a doctor? First, they said no. Then they said yes. And then they said no again. I mean, it's an insult to the public that would actually happen. And, I've always thought if you either make a big mistake that you shouldn't have made, or you performed in a way that you're just not proud of, what you do is you own it, and then you move on, and you move on with positive ideas and opinions that will perhaps let the public see that you had a bad night. All they do is they go, oh, look, Joe, he had a bad night. I don't know if he had a bad night. A lot of people had a bad night. General Custer, 150 years ago, he had a bad night. And that's a bad night. But this kind of almost insulting the public. And then President Trump, who I've had, my business is not to compliment President Trump, but he hadn't really said anything about this because he was playing with the House's money. He was doing fine. Then he comes out on Friday and says he wants to have a no-holds-barred debate with Trump. Now, I'm sorry, with Biden. I don't know why he would do that. In other words, everything's going his way right now, but it's almost like he just can't, win. He has to win by trying to stomp on someone. And it could backfire because if they had another debate and Biden shows even the slightest improvement, it's going to look like a great improvement because the first improvement was so bad. So I really wish the former president consulted with me before he said something like that.
Governor, talk about the shift. Vice president is a supportive role. It would be awkward for a vice president to try to be presidential and show some type of competition with their boss. So it is definitely a supportive role. But now the spotlight is on Kamala Harris, right? They're looking at her in a different way. The Democratic Party is looking at her in a different way. Republicans are watching. What are your thoughts on the Kamala Harris factor now?
I was kind of surprised to read a poll that showed that she's only 8 points behind President Trump. That kind of surprised me. I would have thought it was a whole lot more because vice presidents never really shine. You only really hear about them when they do something that they shouldn't have done. And so I was sort of surprised by that. But what I would say is she's had the right rhetoric. She's just said President Trump's running. I'm his vice president. We beat him in 2020. We'll beat him in 2024. It's the standard commentary. But it is interesting that we in our history have had vice presidents who got involved even when they really didn't want to, like Vice President Pence having to make what was the correct legal decision about certifying the election in 2020, and Vice President Ford having to move up to be president after President Nixon resigned in 1974. So it is a position that we probably should pay far more attention to, but presidential politics just is so over-consuming. It always comes down to being about them.
This is Greg Kelly for Priority Gold. What does it mean to be America's precious metals dealer? It means that you're in touch with the hearts and minds of those who love this country, value our freedom, and want to protect the future. Priority Gold is that precious metals dealer. They've helped thousands of Americans back their retirement with solid gold and silver. Call Priority Gold at 888-506-6439. Receive free shipping, free storage, a free investment guide, and one of the best purchase experiences in the industry. Call now or go to PriorityGold.com.
Yeah, it can wear you out. But the Democratic Party, they have to think strategically now that there is a possibility concerning, Joe Biden. And they got to think about the DNC. They got to think about the others who would like to run. If they make a decision like that, the timing is critical. Speak to that, Governor.
One idea really might be, if Biden has to step down, is let the vice president run. She probably will lose, but in the time that she's running, the party could start rebuilding, start kind of drafting those young leaders who could really be the wave of the future. And look, what's the worst thing that can happen? Trump gets elected for a second time. I kind of don't think the country is going to fall into the ocean while he's president. He may do a whole lot of things that a lot of us don't like, but now you're set up to come out in 2028. He cannot run again because you can only serve more than 2 terms. Some people thought it was 2 terms back to back.
Right.
But that's not the way it is legally.
That's an important point. I have to interrupt you there. That's an important point. It's not 2 consecutive terms. It's just 2 terms, period, even though there's a disruption as with Trump, correct? Those are the rules, right, Governor?
Yes, absolutely.
Governor, let me ask you this. Looking back at the debate performance, it's not enough to say he had a bad night. I was reading something by Richard Haas. Richard Haas said, well, those say he's not what he was. And Haas's point was, not only is he not what he was, he's not what he needs to be. I mean, that becomes very clear. So how do you come back when it's so obvious that you really can't make the comeback necessary to demonstrate that you can effectively lead? And now when you come back and say, look, I'm not going to schedule events after 8 p.m. at night, it's a further concession to the diminished person that you are. Yeah, diminished capacity. So I don't see how you recover from that. I think the party has to look at this and say, this is not what the country needs right now. We need to make a decision, and we can't continue on this present path.
Well, unfortunately, it's remarks like that either the president or the administration advising him is taking they're taking a tact that really makes them look worse than if they'd said nothing at all. Because how do you start saying I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock from now on when the second debate will start at 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
But they never thought about that.
And God forbid there's any major catastrophe in the country after 8 o'clock,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but that was funny.
Maybe we need to wake up the president. That kind of thing. Terribly, this is a side note, but there was a terrible crash of a flight in Buffalo in 2009, and 48 people were killed, and 2 people in the house that the plane landed on were killed. And my staff did not wake me up. The crash had occurred around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I don't find out about it until 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm the last one to the scene, and I got buried to this. And so best advice when you're president, stay as late up as late as you can. And get up as early as you can.
Yeah. So where do you see this playing out? If you could predict, do you think they continue with Biden? Do you think open convention? Biden says, I turn it over to Harris. She's my candidate.
I think they'll likely continue with Biden, but they have a real problem is that the big money people that always give to the Democrats clearly seem to be indicating that they've had enough. They want to see someone else. And that's why I was saying if someone else were to run, even if they lose, you're already on your way to rebuilding the party down the road. Mm-hmm. You don't have to now spend 4 more years with Biden trying to think about who will come when he leaves. You can start now. But I think that the worst thing about this entire incident was that it exposed, not that Biden for 90 minutes was operating under some diminished capacity, but also that the administration really didn't have a plan. Sometimes you have to get up the next day. You don't wait 4 or 5 days. Get up the next day. I was not feeling well. I performed terribly, but I'm not using that as an excuse. I'll be back later on. Right now, let me get back to the business of running the country and campaigning for reelection. It would have been a quick statement. Then you move on. They're like a cat chasing its tail the way they respond to the media.
And I think they hid, or they tried to cover up the diminution of the president prior to the debate. We saw this, ongoing decline, and yet people wouldn't admit it.
Yeah. And, I didn't like when Democrats were criticizing Reagan in his second term, when Reagan clearly was not what he was when he first got elected. And then, the Republicans were saying that Obama wasn't born in the United States and these things. So I kind of took this, Biden's too old, because he's only 2.5 years older than Trump. I just took this to be political rhetoric, but now it's become a legitimate issue. And it's no longer even a question of his health. It's now a campaign issue whether his health gets better or worse.
Okay.
Governor.
Last question, Rev.
Look, I would keep him on for the rest of the evening. I mean, come on.
He doesn't go later than 8 o'clock.
But Governor, there was discussion of Trump's appeal to Americans making $50,000 per year or less, based upon our 333 million population. That's about 19% of the population, 63 million American voters. Respond to that, Governor.
I thought that he, and I've always given him credit, was really the first president to recognize the historic black colleges and universities, the HBCUs, and had them to the White House and, arranged for some sponsorship for them and that kind of thing. Then he went on to talk about it, but that was the only specific activity that he took in his first administration. And so I don't know why he'll be any different in his second administration, except that he likes to talk about things in his imagination and then doesn't make it happen. So that's, I didn't hear what I thought was sincerity from him on that subject.
Okay.
All right. Governor David A. Paterson, always enlightening to have you with us. And, ABC is lucky to have you because you bring a certain insight that needs to be heard. And here you are, a member of the Democratic Party, but that doesn't prevent you from being open and honest about your feelings. And I think that says a lot about you.
Well, ABC is lucky to have the two of you. I think it actually should be a TV show on Channel 7.
Well, so far, you've negotiated 50% of the deal. Now convince ABC.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you so much, Governor.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Governor. And thank you, our listeners. We'll be right back to close on 77 WABC, The Rev and the Rabbi.
Hi, it's Lou Dobbs for Priority Gold, America's precious metals dealer. These are volatile times with high inflation, soaring debt, wars on multiple continents, and rising financial stress. Central banks are buying gold to diversify their reserves, so are many Americans. Call Priority Gold and find out how precious metals can help you diversify your portfolio. They're highly rated and happy to help. Call 1-866-303-6357 or get a free gold guide at PriorityGoldGuide.com. That's PriorityGoldGuide.com.